I was obese for most of my life. I was one of those 93% of Americans that are unhealthy for most of my life. And not just physically obese, but mentally obese. I was depressed, suicidal.
It's a problem of being overfed and undernourished. You know, a lot of people that are big, they're like, oh, you have a mental problem, but they actually do have a biological and mental aspect of it where they're always hungry because they're undernourished.
Keto is not a diet. Keto is a metabolic process.
Ketones are actually signaling molecules. And it stresses the mitochondria. It tells the mitochondria, dude, you're going through a famine.
First of all, I would tell you right off the bat, do not dare to do a ketogenic diet unless you read that book, because it is not easy to do keto correctly. Hey guys, welcome back to another edition of Beyond Biohacking Brothers, where we explore everything about longevity, optimization, biohacking, and beyond. And today we have the great pleasure of being with Ben Azadi and my brother Carlos, as always. As the author of Keto Flex and Metabolic Freedom, Ben empowers individuals to achieve fat loss, hormonal balance, and cellular repair by integrating ketogenic nutrition with intermittent fasting. Ben, I can't thank you enough for joining us in person. This is going to be a really fun podcast.
We're going to have fun. I love what you guys are doing, Miguel, Carlos. Thank you guys for having me here.
Thank you, man.
Thank you for coming. And you know, I think this conversation is a really important one, as we know, and 93% of Americans are suffering from some kind of metabolic issue or dysfunction. And so your book is amazing in taking people through a process, because I love how you explain it. Keto is not a diet. Keto is a metabolic process. And the way that you lay it out with history and science, and you give a very practical approach to solve a problem that's ailing all of us. So congrats, man. I'm really excited to have the conversation today.
I am too. Thank you for that, brother.
So let's start with the most important thing. What was the inspirational thing that got you to create Keto Flex and the Freedom Diet, and basically what inspired you to do it?
Pain to purpose, like so many of us. I was obese for most of my life. I was one of those 93% of Americans that are unhealthy for most of my life. And not just physically obese, but mentally obese. I was depressed, suicidal. I wanted to give up on life. I was 23 years old back in 2007, 250 pounds, 34% body fat. My whole body was inflamed, so much so that I would go to the shopping mall for an hour, and I would have to wear knee braces and back straps because I was just in so much physical pain. As a 23-year-old guy.
I can't imagine the amount of inflammation.
You probably look like a different human.
Yeah, totally different person. Not just outside, but inside with my thoughts and mental health. Yeah. And high blood pressure, metabolic syndrome, pre-diabetes, and I was going through a bad breakup. So I was actually looking for ways to end my life.
Guys, so you understand what metabolic syndrome is a combination of high blood pressure, high blood sugar levels, excess abdominal fat around the midsection, high triglyceride levels, and low HDL. Which
check mark,
and whatever else you had.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, erectile dysfunction. The list goes on and on and on. And look, I went to my doctor and I looked for answers, and he didn't have answers. He just said, there might be a medication for you to take that could help lower your blood pressure. We might have to explore putting on diabetes medication. And I was frustrated and I wanted to give up. And I was literally on the internet looking for ways to end my life because I was just depressed and tired of being in pain. So I took ownership and responsibility. And it didn't start with just like me just deciding to take ownership and responsibility. I started to actually read books on self-development. It was actually a mental shift before a physical shift occurred. Got into Bob Proctor's work, Tony Robbins,
which you do
Dr. Wayne Dyer.
Great job on stage speaking, man. Yeah. We love
regurgitating that. Yeah, it's great.
I learned from the greats, right? But they would share things with me that just would light me up. They would help me take responsibility. And I think that is the first step towards great change in our health and our life. It's responsibility. And that word simply means our ability to respond to life. If our ability to respond to life is poor, we're going to get poor results.
Yeah, of course.
But when we stop being the victim and start to become the victor, then we change our life, we change our circumstances. And that's what I did, dude. In 9 months, I went from 250 pounds to 170 pounds, 34% body fat to as low as 6% body fat at my lowest.
And how long again? I'm sorry?
In 9 months.
9 months. That's incredible transformation.
And it created this incredible physical transformation, but also what it did for my mental health. That was 17 plus years ago. That's what got me in the health space before I became a personal trainer, opened a CrossFit gym, and wrote all these books. But that was the starting point. That's why I decided to write the books and talk about the message that you guys preach as well.
Now
I think. Yeah. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No. Now it just makes sense. Well, you have the Keto Flex boot camp. 9 months of boot camp. There's so many out there that unfortunately are still victims, and it's a problem of being overfed and undernourished. You know, a lot of people that are big, they're like, "Oh, you have a mental problem," but they actually do have a biological and mental aspect of it, where they're always hungry because they're undernourished.
It's true. And you know, the thing about victims, Tony Robbins said, "There's no such thing as victims, only volunteers." Yeah. We choose to be a victim. It's not necessarily who we are.
And I love the progression, right? Because it's almost and I don't want to discredit anything or belittle any of your success. It's just I find it so interesting that there's a common sort of pattern with people that go through this transformation that you did, right? And you've outlined it beautifully. The first thing that you did is, well, you didn't accept the death sentence of a doctor telling you to get on these medications, but the more foundational thing that I think is super amazing is you change the computer chip first. You change the mind first, because you, as you said, this was 17 years ago, right? But you still hold the results. So it's not just a physical thing. It was an internal thing that you shifted. This
identity.
This paradigm shift. You change your identity. You said, I will not be this person. I want to be someone else. And that created the roadmap for you. Because look, if you're someone that is in the same state that Ben was, right? Most of us think that it's like this Herculean effort that we have to make and this mountain that we'll never be able to overcome. But as your story outlines, it took 9 months for a complete transformation. But the catalyst for that was first change your mind.
That's right.
And then you do all of the strategies and all the stuff, because by changing your mind, you will ensure sustainable results, which is what you achieved. So
100%.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing stuff.
Your story reminds me, and I know you like phrases by Zig Ziglar. You don't have to be great to start, but you do have to start to be great.
That's right, bro.
Yeah.
One
Good
block
old Zig.
at a time.
That's right.
Will get you to this transformation, which is amazing, because you are being a huge light to others of that it's totally possible, and not only possible to maintain permanently. You know, it's not about how much money you make, it's how you maintain that wealth.
That's right.
Same thing applies to your results. You know, we're not impressed by, I lost 200 pounds. Yeah, how long have you had it off for?
Yeah.
You tell me 5 years. Okay, I
got
respect
my attention.
that. Yeah, I respect
and you know,
that.
it's really fun. I'm a Tony Robbins fan too. I went to his first seminar when I was 21.
Tony Robbins?
Yeah. I did all the courses.
He did the whole course.
He's great. He's amazing. But the funny thing is that I do the same thing that you do. Like, I use certain phrases as mantras in my life. Yeah. So the way that I changed my health and the way that I got into it, when I was in my 20s, Tony has a great saying that says, nothing tastes as good as being healthy feels. And just holding on to that phrase was what propelled me to take all the actions and make the decisions that I made by sustaining that thought. Nothing tastes as good as being healthy feels. And it's funny because now when you're in the optimization field, there's a lot of stuff that you have to take that doesn't taste great.
That's right. That's right.
And usually the stuff that tastes great is horrendous for you. So we always tell patients, hey, you want to be successful? Divorce taste.
Yeah.
F taste. So,
focus on the results, not on the immediate pleasure.
That's right. That's great advice. That's the truth.
So can you briefly walk us through ancestral living and how it ties back into the Keto Flex? Because you have a beautiful way of laying out in the book. And for those that haven't read it, it's a little, maybe a hook to make them want to read it, because it's a phenomenal book that reads super easy.
Yeah, it's an awesome read.
Not too long. It's
Thank you.
Great read, man. And your layout is so beautiful, how you put the analogy.
Thank you. Yeah, we have a problem. As you mentioned, 93% of Americans are metabolically unhealthy. It's even worse than that. I think the percentages are even higher. People are just not getting lab work. They have no idea. So we have an issue, but we have some great solutions. You guys do great work in teaching these solutions with your Medical Health Institute. Yes. Ancient healing strategies have been around forever. Mm-hmm. These are tools that have stood the test of time. When a book is a classic, like Think and Grow Rich, was
timeless.
written, timeless, and it's because it focuses on universal laws. Yeah. We have this in the health space. Ketosis is one of them, and a lot of people have heard of keto, and like you said, it's not a keto diet, or I think you might have said it. It's a metabolic process. It's not a diet. Yeah. keto is not new. It's just nuanced or new to some people, right? But ketosis has been around for as long as humans have existed. It's an ancient healing strategy.
It's a system.
It's a system. It's a metabolic process. And essentially, those 93% of Americans are in a keto deficiency. They forgot how to burn fat. They're only burning sugar. And there's nothing wrong with burning sugar unless you're only burning sugar. That's metabolic inflexibility. So we could use keto as one of the tools in the shed to unlock metabolic flexibility, which is the ability to burn whatever substrate is available.
Whether carbs or fat, you can shift back and forth. We did yesterday, we interviewed one of the main scientists of Lumen and how the Lumen helps you shift from carb burning to fat burning.
It measures and it tells you if you're burning carbohydrates, burning fat, right? And we could do that by looking at blood glucose and ketones as well. So that's the goal, right? Keto is one of those tools. Then we have fasting. Fasting is another ancient healing strategy. Many ways to do keto, many ways to do fasting. Both are powerful tools. A chainsaw is a powerful tool. If you know how to use it, get amazing results. A chainsaw could also hurt you if you don't know how to use it, right? Same thing with keto and fasting. You could do it the wrong way if you don't understand and have not read the user manual. So Keto Flex outlines how to use fasting, how to use ketosis, how to get fat adapted, and then how to flex in and out. That's what I believe separates me from most people in the keto space. They're very 100%. Dogmatic about always being in ketosis or always doing carnivore, and I don't agree with that.
We don't believe in any extremes like that. I think we were seasonal, and depending on what we had in winter or summer or spring, we had to shift, right?
That's right.
We had to just
and I think that speaks volumes from a guy that, you know, you're known as the keto guy, and you say, hey, keto all the time is not good, right? So that's very wise advice.
And that wasn't when I first started getting into keto and fasting in 2013. This is when I had my CrossFit gym here in Miami.
I never knew you had a CrossFit gym.
I did for 5 years.
It was a big craze.
Yeah, it was. Back then it was super popular. But I started getting into keto and fasting in 2013. I was doing all these seminars at my CrossFit gym, and my students hated the idea of lowering their carbs and practicing fasting. Of course, now it's more well adopted, but that's another form of metabolic inflexibility, meaning when you're only burning sugar, you're metabolically inflexible. That's the 93% of Americans.
By the way, just a note, guys, when he says metabolic dysfunction or metabolically unhealthy is having one of those metabolic syndrome markers, whether high blood pressure, high sugar, you have at least one of them. And that's what makes you metabolically unhealthy.
Yeah,
just
exactly.
for people to know, because I confused them for a while.
Yeah, and the study showed that at least 93% of Americans have at least one of those metrics that are off. So that's one variation of metabolic inflexibility when you're only burning carbohydrates, only burning sugar. That's the majority of people. But those that are extreme in the keto, carnivore, fasting space are only burning fat. They forgot how to burn sugar, right? That's another form of metabolic inflexibility. Right. We want to be able to go back and forth. For me, I'm probably in ketosis 80% of the time, and then I have 20% where I'm eating high healthy carbohydrates, like 400 grams of carbs in a day. I'll go back to ketosis within 24 hours. That's a sign of metabolic flexibility, and the book teaches how to do that.
Right. I mean, I just love using the Lumens device because it takes the guesswork out of the science, especially how you slept, if you're stressed, if you're overtrained, etc. And it's a really good tool to help you understand how healthy you are metabolically, right? And not most people that are not in tune with their body, they don't really understand. And by the way, when you're metabolically unhealthy and you're only a carb burner, that's where they feel like, oh my God, I'm going to die. It's been only 8 hours without eating. And it's like, no, they don't. That's because their body's having a really hard time shifting into that keto style.
Yeah. And it makes such, like, I think that's such an emphatic point, and it makes so much sense. Like, I mean, you've, since I've known you, you've been super slim and you've maintained that way. And you just said there's some days that I eat 400 grams of carbs.
Yeah, you know, every Saturday and Sunday.
Amazing. And by the way, like, we say that all the time. Like, hey, look, if you're metabolically unhealthy, look, there's going to be some sacrifices that you're going to have to make. It's not going to be forever, but it's kind of like finances, right? If your finances are in order, can you go on a shopping spree? You can, because Monday through Friday, you're going to go to work and you're going to do the right thing. Now, is it wise if you're $50,000 in credit card debt to go on shopping sprees every day? And that's what people are doing with their health.
It's a great analogy.
Yeah. You know, it's what people are doing with their health. So, hey, I can give you the shopping spree. You can go buy yourself a Rolex if you want. Just make sure that your finances are in order before you do that. Yeah. Right? Don't be stupid.
Your checks and balances are in place.
Your checks and balances. And so that's why I tell people, think of nutrition like money, right? Like, you're not going to go on a shopping spree. You're not going to go on a luxurious vacation if your finances are not in order. But if they are, you can have those gifts. You can plan every 3 months, I'm going to go on a vacation to Europe with my wife, whatever it is, right? So you have a strategy where you schedule those pleasurable moments where you eat these carbs that you're like, hey, I can let myself go, because on Monday morning, I'm going to get back on the horse and I'm going to do the right thing.
That's exactly right. So the new book is called Metabolic Freedom because you have the freedom to do that, right? And then it has that 30-day plan so you can actually achieve that within 30 days. To your point, if you have insulin resistance, and here's the crazy thing, we could look at our blood sugars and we could test our A1C, which is, as you guys know,
which is not a good predictor by itself.
No, but it's not a good predictor by itself. You're correct, and I'm making your point here, but it's a 3-month average of your blood sugar for those who don't know. But
the A1C.
The A1C is. Yes. But the studies actually show, Whitehall Study 1, Whitehall Study 2, and several others, I put this in Metabolic Freedom, that you could have insulin resistance for, on average, 6 to 14 years, and your fasting blood sugars and your A1C could look perfectly normal because your pancreas is just screaming, producing so much insulin to keep your blood sugars in check until all of a sudden, boom, they get burnt out, pre-diabetic and diabetic. And once
now you can become type 1 diabetic.
You could become type 1.
Your pancreas can give out, and that's it, I'm done.
Correct. But once you're diabetic, you've got some problems. But high insulin is the first domino to fall.
Right.
Once you're nobody dies from diabetes, by the way. It's pretty rare. They're dying from the diseases connected to it. Heart disease, kidney failure, amputation. That's what happened to my dad.
Which, by the way,
2014.
we consider pre-diabetes
diabetes, right?
Because you're either pregnant or you're not.
That's correct.
You're not pre-pregnant.
Yeah, there's no gray area. That's correct, right?
And diabetes, like, the old, war on drugs thing where it's like, oh, marijuana is the gateway to all other drugs. Well, metabolic disease is the gateway to all of the killers of man.
And there's a study that showed if your A1C is 7.5% or higher, which again, for your audience, that's the 3-month measurement.
6.4 and above, you're diabetic.
Correct. And if it's 7.5% or higher, every year it's at that level, the studies show the person loses 100 days off their lifespan. Wow. So if it's at that level for 15 years, it's 4 years off their lifespan. That is how destructive high levels of blood sugar is.
It's funny because I learned the average red blood cell lives 120 days, but on a diabetic, it's about 81 days. Wow. So that kind of correlates. Yeah. Very interesting.
Yeah, exactly.
And by the way, we love to look at insulin when somebody's like, oh, I want to burn fat, and they want like AOD peptide, and they want all these fat burners, and their insulin is anything above 10, which ideally we would like to see it under 6. Yeah. It's like you're swimming against current. Yeah. Fat burning is going to be very difficult.
Correct.
And the hematology or a chemical composition of insulin and growth hormone are very about 50% identical and to compete for the same receptors. So if you have really high insulin and I give you a growth hormone secretagogue, you're wasting your money because it's trying to trump down the insulin rather than let's bring your insulin down. Let's get rid of the metabolic dysfunction, get your diet with the keto flex in place, and now we can introduce peptides so you can maximize your results.
That's brilliant. The standard reference range for fasting insulin is 3 to 25.
Right.
And
which is crazy.
If you're 11, you're insulin
resistant. The outer edge of the target, you're okay.
It's ridiculous.
It doesn't make any sense. I don't know where they get these markers.
Some of the signs and symptoms of high insulin, of course, you mentioned feeling tired after eating, having to snack in between meals, skin tags, brown patches on your neck and armpit area, and of course, just having extra weight around your abdominal area. Those are all signs of somebody who's insulin resistant.
Yeah. Are you concerned about erectile dysfunction, or what we like to call erectile issues? At the Medical Health Institute, we understand the impact this could have on your life.
And that's why we're thrilled to unveil FirmTech, a revolutionary advancement in both erectile and cardiovascular performance. FirmTech provides cutting-edge technology and products tailored to accurately track your sexual and cardiovascular performance. With its pioneering technology and user-friendly interface, FirmTech monitors and empowers you to effectively address erectile concerns, ensuring optimal wellness.
Visit the MHI Recommend section on our website to learn more about FirmTech and get your exclusive discount code, or simply give us a call and we'll point you in the right direction. For now, stay healthy.
And God bless.
So let's get a little geeky for the ones that...
let's get into the science.
Because your Metabolic Freedom talks about cellular health, autophagy, and mitochondrial repair. Yeah. What does that translate to the average person? Because I love, you're like us in that sense that you got to grab the science and be able to bring it down to way that people can connect with it. People learn through chain linking, like Jim Kiwick explains, right? Yeah. So we have to dumb it down in a way that people can be like, now it makes sense.
I wouldn't say dumb it down. I would say simplify it.
Okay.
Like synthesize it.
Yeah, like
negative connotation.
Because when you say dumb it down, people feel like, oh, I'm not dumb.
They might get offended.
Turn off this podcast.
But trust me, I like dumb things down.
Yeah, simplify it for sure. Yeah, those are really fancy terms, right? Autophagy, mitochondrial function, mitophagy,
mitochondrial biogenesis,
phosphorylation. I mean, we could go down the list of like complicated words, but you're right. If it goes over somebody's head, like we haven't made an impact with them.
But it's important to understand what that's doing, especially when you're fasting, right? But before a little side note, we tell our patients whenever they get hungry, get excited, high five yourself because that's your body saying, "Hey, shift to metabolically being flexible."
Yeah,
right?
And the reason we'd like to do that because someone who and we feel for it, right? Like someone who's dealing with these challenges in this modern world with the toxicity and the nutrient deficiency, which we'll talk about in terms of ancestral living, but someone who's going through this journey, which is a tough journey, right? Because they have a lot of people who are trying to lose weight, they don't have other people that support them because everybody else is unhealthy, right? So a lot of times it's like we're the only supporters and friends that they have in this journey. So we feel for them because it's very difficult. So a lot of times someone who's, overweight and they're dealing with hunger pangs, right? Like every time that they get hungry, they internalize it as a negative thing. Oh my God, I'm a loser. This isn't working. Oh my God, I'm going to quit, right? And it's like, no, change the definition, right? Change the meaning of that message and say, oh my God, I'm hungry. This means that my body is about to tap into all this stuff that I want to get rid of.
And that's the association you got to change though, because people associate to pain.
Yeah.
And you got to be able to associate.
They associate with suffering.
Yeah. Yes. That's the biggest, that's where you said the mental part, I'm like, that's so important to shift.
That's a great thing you do with your patients and clients. It's true. I mean, there's nothing dangerous about the hunger hormone ghrelin, right? It's actually an antioxidant. It's completely normal. And the cool thing about all hormones, we know this, they're all pulsatile, right? So when you feel hungry, you got ghrelin going, it'll maybe last 10, 15 minutes, right? You celebrate that, and then it's gone, right? Go for a walk, work out, distract yourself, and it's gone. It's not going to last. And you're right, you're burning fat, you're lowering insulin. It's the great reframe.
Well, in our book that we're writing now, Carlos and I.
Nice.
Yes, thank you.
You inspired us.
We talk about Angus Barberi, the guy who fasted the longest, 382 days, which is a little bit more than a year and like 3 weeks or 2 weeks. Weighted 456 pounds, lost 276 pounds, which is 60% of his body weight by just consuming minerals, vitamins, and essential amino acids. So we use that. Carlos did great to portray it, how we use that to say, hey, if he can do it, then you can lose those 20, 30 pounds, right?
I always talk about can is a word of ability. So before I teach anybody about fasting, I'm like, hey, let me just tell you a story. Can is a word of ability. Would you agree? So you can do it. Will is a different story. So Angus Barberi, how long do you think is the longest, record fast? Usually people go 60, 90, 120 days. I'm like, try over a year. Yeah. And they're like, no way. I'm like, yes, this guy did it. So the fact that he did it proves that you can do it. Now, I'm not saying that you need to fast for a year, but I'm saying that don't complain when you get hungry for one day.
Yeah.
Like, people,
stop being up.
And then
the other things in perspective.
And the other is like, hey, look at these hungers as a message. They're so incredible because it kind of guides us, right? So when you're hungry and everybody's had that experience where they're, I feel so hungry, I feel like I'm going to die. Interestingly enough, that's exactly what's happening. Your cells are saying, dude, I need to pump your heart 100,000 times a day. I'm dying. I don't have any fuel and I don't want to touch your fat. If you become the locus of control, because your body is basically throwing a temper tantrum, you become the adult and say, no, you got plenty of toys to play with.
That's right.
Go get them. And then your body, your cells have an emergency protocol. Be like, this dude's not feeding me. I need to go tap into the fat reserves. Taps into the fat reserves. Guess what happens to hunger? Poof.
That's right.
Gone.
That's right.
So change the meaning is what we always get into. And I think you do an amazing job in your book of explaining that. So.
No, you said it well. That's exactly it, right? Once those ketones come flowing through your bloodstream, like the hunger goes away.
Right?
And the ketones are a byproduct of burning fat. Yeah. And you got to experience hunger to get to that level. Yeah. It's all good things.
So we'll eventually get to a little bit of the science of that. But again, autophagy and mitochondrial repair.
Yeah. So we know we have these little batteries within all of our cells called the mitochondria. They're the energy power plant. There's a lot more to what the mitochondria do, but they help us produce energy, right? They help us produce energy called ATP. And the more energy our cells are producing, the more energy we have and the more fat we burn because it raises our basal metabolic rate. When we think about somebody who's inflamed, pre-diabetic, insulin resistant, all the things we're mentioning, cancer, autoimmune, they have mitochondrial dysfunction. They have mitochondria that are inflamed, that have inflammation around its membrane. The cells have inflammation. So what can we do about that? Well, we want to clean out the junk, right? We want to repair some of the inflammatory mitochondria in our cells. And autophagy is one of the ways to do it. And it's called mitophagy, like you mentioned. And the analogy I always give for autophagy for people to really make it make sense is a refrigerator, right? We have a refrigerator right there.
I love this. You never heard of this concept of his?
No. Oh, yeah.
Great.
I might have heard about it. I mean, I've watched you speak a ton of times.
You're definitely going to put in your pitch now.
Okay, come on.
It's great. That's why I want to hear it. It's amazing. We have another one. We'll give you another one.
I want to hear the other one too. But yeah, the analogy for how autophagy works is a refrigerator, right? We open up our refrigerator and we see groceries that all have an expiration date. Every grocery has an expiration date. Now imagine if we let all the groceries just expire. We don't use it and we don't throw them away in the trash. We just kind of shove them towards the back of the fridge.
Mold.
Yeah, and we buy fresh groceries, put them in front of the expired groceries, close the door, open it up like you mentioned, mold, it's going to be a disease will manifest in that environment, right? Yeah. Our cells, our mitochondria, our body has expiration dates. We have expiration dates on proteins and fats and mitochondria and cells. And autophagy is the process of cleaning out the junk, getting rid of the expired groceries. And you could achieve that through strength training, fasting, different things like senolytics. But autophagy is how you harness that, how you get rid of those expired groceries. And it's one of the main ways to prevent cancer, get rid of damaged cells, repair those damaged cells. And the body is so sophisticated that it goes a step further. The innate intelligence, when it finds a cell that has no function, which is called a senescent cell, also called a zombie cell,
which they become SASP, aggressive.
They're aggressive. They infect others and they recruit others as zombie cells, essentially. It leads to cancer and disease. When your body's going through autophagy and it starts kind of like Pac-Man cleaning out the junk.
Those are the lysosomes.
Yeah, the lysosomes.
I always say
that's Pac-Man going.
Eating all the freaking debris.
If the innate intelligence finds cells that have no function, then it creates a signal called apoptosis, which you guys know, programmed cell death, gets rid of that cell altogether, but it's not done. It then sends a signal for a stem cell. And that stem cell could be for your liver, it could be for your brain. The innate intelligence will determine where it's going to be used. And all of this is happening without you thinking about it. It's all happening during a fast, through strength training. You could take different like ingredients like senolytics, and that's what autophagy is.
Beautiful. Well said. I like to always describe also autophagy. Like mitophagy is just getting rid of dysfunctional mitochondria and rebuilding them, which is what revs the engine. Autophagy gets rid of the cellular debris, but we're starting to focus a lot on cellular health, right? Because we have about, depending on what literature you look, 70 to 78 organs, but within a cell, you got 13 organelles, right? Like the Golgi apparatus, the endothelium, the nucleus, the lysosome, the mitochondria. You have all these little organ systems that one is to clean up, one is to package proteins, make lipids, and it's a whole little factory. So if you can get the inner cellular function optimized, then when you zoom out, every organ function would work much better, and that's how you get the body back to being metabolically healthy.
Yeah, it's a ripple effect.
And the thing that which eventually I want you to get into right now, why is burning ketones much healthier than burning glucose as a fuel for the body? And I'll get to my point after you do.
Okay. Yeah, and that I actually want to add to the mitochondrial conversation, and then it'll allow me to answer that because it's tied into it too. But just to give your audience an idea to why it's so important to have healthy mitochondria, the cells in our body that are most required for survival and that are most metabolically active are the cells that have the most mitochondria. God put it in the cells that are most needed for survival. Survival is the number one priority for the human body.
Yeah.
The body will do everything possible to survive.
Self-preservation.
Right? So we think about most cells in our body maybe have a few
500 to 2,000 per cell. In your heart, over 10,000. The retina of your eye has over 50,000. And I like to say we have over 40 trillion cells. Make the math.
Yeah, you nailed it right there, right? And the brain has millions of mitochondria.
And we have 37 mitochondria genes with thousands of functions. I mean, it's incredible.
It just blows your mind.
You can't even wrap your head around it.
So that just shows you how important it is to have healthy mitochondria. In our health space, we have disagreements about keto diet, carnivore, plant plant-based, fasting, no fasting, snacking, calorie counting, whatever it is. But one thing we could all agree to is that it's important to have healthy mitochondria. Okay, so to your question about keto and fat and sugar versus...
Well, but actually that brings one point before you go into that. Whenever you eat high carbohydrate diet, especially processed foods, you get a glucose spike, which is inflammatory. You get insulin spike, which is extremely inflammatory. The glucose produces advanced glycation end products, which scar the lining tissue, reducing your nitric oxide production. And your mitochondria get inflamed, so now they can't efficiently burn fat because they can't even burn energy, and that's why we store fat. So it's a triple whammy that you're really hurting your body.